we going? Okay. I'm sorry, I forgot to bring coffee. Very important. Okay. Last week, I mentioned that I had a friend that was very ill, and I also mentioned our friend Catherine's mom. And unfortunately, this week I'm here to report that neither one of them were able to maintain their lives. They both lost their lives. Catherine's mom happened to be a Christian, and my friend Renee, who I asked you guys to actually chant for, he never was going to get a liver. He was already 4th-stage cancer. That was always, I didn't figure that out until later. They put him almost immediately into hospice, which is another thing that I'll discuss. So, for a month, I have been through so much. I've been through a lot of emotional, it's almost been an emotional roller coaster in that, I probably haven't cried as much as I have in the last month ever in my adult life, because my friend Renee meant that much to me. And so, during the course of these conversations, there may be times when I can't hold back tears, just like I'm faced with right now. So if I have to take a moment, just let me have one tissue. Please bear with me. As a result of that, though, I find myself compelled after a lot of deep daimoku to also decide to embark on a very dangerous journey, in the sense of a lot of people might think that I'm not qualified, or I might be doing this or that, or who do I think I am to start this kind of a conversation. But I really want to go into depth and detail over this issue of the heritage of the ultimate law of life and death. And for the people that aren't here, last week after we turned off the cameras, without there really being a point of reference to Catherine or Renee, because everybody at the table was anticipating somehow something would happen, we would all succeed in our endeavor to send daimoku that would keep things going, and it didn't, and it doesn't always, and that's why we have to understand what life and death is always about. So according to Nietzsche, and this is the most important thing to understand in all of the teaching of Buddhism, is the principle of birth and death. He says those are the two things that you feel. Once you get birth and death, then you can go after all the theoretical crap, because the most important things are birth and death, okay? Because that's what actually is going to impact your next life, okay, and how you view this life. And so I've decided to, and so again, Zoe, another friend that's here for years around the table supporting these conversations, had brought this, because some time ago we realized, we have not done this on camera, but we've already all read this. We've already all read everything there is to read virtually. But the point is that you don't read it once, you read it over and over and over and over again. So it never matters whether you've read it, you reread it and you reread it, okay? So to share this with people, and what was weird was when I picked up my copy of this, here was this thing with Sangay and all kinds of stuff that I'll go over again. It's just strange that it was in this book. Last week we had decided, okay, we'll do this, but I was a little hesitant because it's like the law of life and death. What if, I don't want to have anybody thinking about death if we're talking about people that are trying to, Yes. So, but then circumstance is that now is the perfect time to talk about life and death, because Amy's experienced death in her family, her father, George, his dad, my mom and dad, Catherine's mom, my friend Renee. The bottom line is I'm now getting to the age where, I'm getting to? I've already gotten to the age, I'm an old guy, okay? And this is the point in time where people are going to start dying that I know. At some point in time, if I sustain my goal and desire to keep doing this for as long as I possibly can, at some point in time, I'm not going to be able to anymore. Will that mean I failed? No. It just means I won't be able to do it anymore. No one's seen President Ikeda speak publicly for years. You know that, right? Right. Okay, so there's a reality to all of this. If you read the Gosho chronologically and you look at what Daishonin was writing at the end of his life, age had tempered even his ability to deal with the difficulty. I mean, you know, again, was there a malady that Daishonin carried with him for at least the last 2 years of his life? Do you know what it was? He was sick for the last 2 years of his life with an excruciating, terrible thing. Do you know what it was? What was it?
Stomach.
Yeah, he was sick, yes.
What?
He was sick during the last 2 years.
Yeah, well, what was he sick from?
Stomach.
Yeah, you could say that. I guess it starts there. Yeah, diarrhea
Diarrhea.
for the last 2 years of his life, okay? Now, did Nichiren Daishonin just chant Daimoku so that the diarrhea went away? Was he able to do that? That was a question that I asked myself as a young member over and over again. I mean, I've really pondered all this shit in depth, okay? I mean, I've really pondered all of this stuff as to what is reality check here, okay? You know, there's a lot of things like, again, you know, there are a lot of Gosho that he writes to people that are experiencing ill health and end of life circumstances. And he's giving specific instructions about the last moment of life and the correct attitude toward death and all those sorts of things. Right. But you know, the way he wrote those letters and the people he wrote them to were facing completely different circumstances than we are today. Right. There were no hospitals that people were being rushed off to. The norm was you died at home. The norm was you died surrounded by your family because they were never that far away, right? The norm, yeah, but I'm saying, you know, the norm was not the norm today, okay? So specific literal guidances that pertain to 13th century Japan have to be looked at a little more objectively for what the deepest meaning is there. And what is the deepest thing that we're supposed to take to heart now in the 21st century, for God's sake? I mean, now, generally speaking, if people are in pain or they're suffering from something like terminal cancer or terminal whatever, they're given end-of-life hospice, care. They're given pain meds. Yes. Usually those pain meds render them unconscious. Yes. Kind of hard to chant at the last moment of your life if you're unconscious. Right. Okay? So what? Is the Daishonin saying then that we have to make the determination that we forego all that kind of thing, that we suffer what there is to suffer, and we just take on all of the physical pain of the maladies that are kind of... No. Do you think that the Daishonin would want us to suffer if there were ways for us not to suffer? Is that ever in his teaching? No. Okay, so there are ways to not suffer today that there were not back in the day of Nichiren Daishonin. The key is to talk about what is the important aspect of life that we're supposed to carry forward, and why do we live our life at all. So, the ultimate law of life and death, the heritage of the ultimate law of life and death, is a very important Gosho. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, when we were talking about the object of devotion for observing the mind, I talked about Toki Jonin. He was no Sairenbo, right? Mm-hmm. This is to Sairenbo. Okay, so rather than read the volume 1 background, okay, to this, I'm going to read a whole lot of stuff. This is going to take several weeks for me to get through. Rather than just read that and then go into the Gosho, there's this excellent thing that's from the study department. It's not from Daisaku Ikeda specifically. I'm sure that it follows pretty much completely his understanding of things, but this is going to be a summation that I'm going to give you before we read the Gosho and then President Ikeda's lecture. Okay? And this is going to have several references then that I won't be able to get in their entirety, and they're much deeper than just the point of reference here that I want to share. So I'm going to be reading a lot of things after I'm done with this before I read the Gosho and then President Ikeda's lecture. Okay? So the Hope-Filled Writings of Nichiren Daishonin, Volume 4, will follow this if you're looking to go get, materials to follow along with us. And this, I don't know, I assume you can get it at the SGI bookstore still. I don't know why they would not have this in print anymore. I'm not sure. But this is from World Tribune Press. This isn't one of the ones from SGI Malaysia, which we will be reading some SGI Malaysia stuff too before it's all over with. But so I'm going to start right now. And this is like about 50, 60 pages. I don't think I'll get it all done tonight. I really don't care how long this takes. I'm not going to push myself. I'm too tired. I've spent so much time crying. So, let's just start. And I'm sorry that I couldn't get this out to you. If anybody wants to photocopy this week, to share it, I think you're just as well off to just listen to me read it to you, because you already know what it's going to say essentially. It's for everybody else that doesn't. All right. So I'm starting out with Commentaries on Buddhahood, which is a series of 4 kind of little study pamphlets like this put out by the Soka Gakkai Study Department. This one's on the heritage of the ultimate law of life. And the full title of that is Of a Life and Death, by the way. Background. Excuse me. There you go, Anika. I waited for you. Background. Nichiren Daishonin wrote The Heritage of the Ultimate Law of Life to Sairinbo Nichijo on February 11, 1272 at Sukahara on Sado Island, where he was exiled, where Sairinbo was also exiled. Okay? So this is the number one thing, okay? What was the best thing that could have ever happened to Sairinbo in his life? What? Attain Buddhahood, that good luck without what I'm talking about. What is the luckiest, most fortunate thing that could have ever happened to Sairinbo in his life? Regardless of all the great things that might have happened, that you could even imagine. He became a rock star. He became a movie star. He became very wealthy. He lived to be 150. No. None of those things are what I'm talking about. What is the most fortunate thing that ever happened to Sairinbo in his life? And you don't know shit about Sairinbo, but you know enough to be able to answer this question.
He heard Nam-myoho Renge Kyo.
Yes, but moreover, how did he hear Nam-myoho Renge Kyo?
From Nichiren.
He met Daishonin.
Yeah,
Huh?
he met the
He met-
Daishonin.
How did he meet the Daishonin?
But he was on the Sado Island.
What, did he live there in the first place?
No.
Was he a Sado Island person?
No.
Why was he on Sado
Because
Island?
he was
He was in exile also! He needs it to go die! Okay? That was the luckiest thing that ever happened to him. Not only did he survive it, he left Sado himself. He won. He won. He went to the place where you're supposed to lose. You're sent there to lose. And he changed poison into medicine. Okay? And that's really what the heritage of the ultimate law of life and death is really all about. Changing poison, the karma that we have in this lifetime, into the medicine of Buddhahood in this lifetime.
Yes.
And to carry it forward. Okay? So, again, understand, Sairinbo, okay? The worst thing that could happen to him ended up being the best thing that could happen to him. All right? The same thing could be said about the Daishonin. What was the best thing that could have ever happened to the Daishonin? Oh, he had in mind many other things than what actually occurred. He really thought it was going to be something other than what did happen. But when it happened, he knew exactly how to respond. What's the best thing that ever happened to the Daishonin? The Tatsunokuchi persecution.
He didn't die.
He didn't. Not only didn't he die, he revealed his true identity,
yes.
and that was the whole point. You know, to not die. Again, life comes and goes. That's the whole point of Nichiren's teaching. You know, life is like boom, 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 boom. You've already had so many. Don't get hung up on this one. Okay? And you're going to have so many. Don't get hung up on the next one. The point is, if you do the right things right now, you can be assured of what the next one will be like. And if you're able to do the right things right now, you can pretty much be assured of what the last ones are like. You understand? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll get on with the foreword here, the background. So again, what can seem like the worst things that happen to us can be turned into, by us, into the best things that happen to us.
Yes.
This is the key to understand about the Daishonin's teaching. It's never about how shitty things are now. It's about how shitty are you going to let them stay? Continue to be. If that bums you out, what are you going to do about making it so it doesn't bum you out? Right. Because you can't change reality. You can't suddenly take all the evil people and get rid of them. Okay? You can't suddenly make everybody have the fortune to understand the truth. Okay? There are only certain things that you can do, but you must know how to do and what to do at the crucial moment. And you must have the faith to be able to discern that this thing that seems like the worst thing isn't the worst thing. Based on what I do, it will either be the worst thing or not. Not what it is. Okay? So Nichiren Daishonin wrote The Heritage of the Ultimate Law of Life to Sairenbo Nichijo on February 11th, 1272 at Sukahara on Sado Island, where he was exiled. He was 51. This letter was written around the same time he wrote The Opening of the Eyes. It had been 3 months since he arrived on Sado. The harshest part of winter had passed, and spring was soon to begin. On January 16th and 17th, before writing The Heritage of the Ultimate Law of Life, Nichiren took part in what came to be known as the Tsukahara debate. Many priests came to challenge him, not only from Sado, but also from several northern provinces. But Nichiren defeated them all. Everybody knows about that one, right? Okay? And that's really, Sairenbo was there. He's one of the guys that threw down his beads, evidently, and said, dude, I'm following you.
Yes.
After the debate, the hostility from Pure Land Nimbutsu school believers increased. Nichiren's life was in constant danger, as he later described. People speculated from one day to the next if I would be beheaded, he said, on repaying debts of gratitude. A handful of people, a Butsubo and the lay priest of Ko among them, took faith in Nichiren Buddhism at that time, impressed by Nichiren's great life condition. Sairenbo had also taken faith right after the Sukahara debate. First, we will examine the letter's title and its subject, The Heritage of the Ultimate Law of Life and Death. Life and death are two aspects of being, repeated for all eternity. So what's the difference between life and death?
The difference.
Yeah. There's no difference.
There's no difference.
There's no difference. Okay. One is being in an incarnate form. The other one's been you're in a state of non-substantiality. That's where we hang out. Ku, right? Temporary existence, non-substantiality, the truth of the middle way. All right. Pardon me. First, we will examine the letter's title and its subject, The Heritage of the Ultimate of Life and Death. Life and death are the two aspects of being repeated for all eternity. This view of existence is based on the idea of the ancient Indian concept of reincarnation. Life and death in the Buddhist context also refer to various sufferings associated with this cycle. The word ultimate literally means in the original Japanese the single important matter, or the matter of essential importance. Hence, single important matter regarding life and death refers to the teaching that is vital for life. Heritage refers to the correct transmission of the law from the Buddha to living beings. Put together, the letter's title can be interpreted as transmitting the law which bears an essential transmitting the law which bears an essential importance in life from the Buddha to living beings. Okay? All right. So Sairenbo, does everybody understand that? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the purpose of this is to express a teaching that's to be understood that is the basis of life and death. Okay, this is the totality of existence that's actually being discussed here. Sairenbo was a student priest of the Tendai school from Kyoto. During that time in the Tendai school, many branch schools transmitted their teachings orally. The oral teachings were written down and kept in a box or bag, which only a few selected disciples would receive, often in some esoteric ritual. Thus, the transmission of Buddhist teachings was mainly conducted in an atmosphere of authoritarianism and mysticism. Okay? And that still exists within Nichiren Shoshu, frankly, whether you're aware of that or not. There are secrets that only the high priest knows.
Yep.
Okay? Now, that's again not in the only for public consumption propaganda book that I held up once upon a time a few weeks ago. This doesn't discuss those true aspects of the doctrine of Nichiren Shoshu. Okay? This is the one that says Rene did not attain Buddhahood. So it says, first, a handful of people, where am I? Sairinbo was a student of the Tendai school from Kyoto. During that time in the Tendai school, and conducted in an atmosphere of authoritarianism and mysticism. Sometimes the contents of transmission, these things, these special secrets that only the top of the clergy had, that they were held in some special place, nobody could find them, get to them, or read them. Okay. Sometimes the contents of transmission were even sold at exorbitant prices. As the word for heritage literally means bloodstream, the Buddhist teachings were sometimes transmitted to relatives, including sons or priests. One can easily imagine then that the quality of the transmitted teachings often quickly deteriorated. Okay? In light of those methods of transmission, many priests debated the subject of the heritage of Buddhism. What is the real deal? This letter is Nichiren's response to Sairinbo's question about the true meaning of the heritage of the law. Not just about Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. This is about the concept of the heritage of the law in Buddhism, okay? Which Nichiren has identified as Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. But Sairinbo's still assimilating all of that based on all of the Mahayana that he knows from the Tentai school, okay? Key points. This is on page 9 of this publication. Key points. Nichiren Daishonin first identifies Nam-myoho Renge-kyo as the ultimate law of life and death to be transmitted. He explains that this law, unparalleled in importance, is transmitted from Shakyamuni Buddha and many treasures Buddha to Bodhisattva superior practices at the ceremony in the air in the Lotus Sutra. Next, he clarifies the relationship between Myoho Renge-kyo and the phases of life and death, writing, life and death are simply the two functions of Myoho Renge-kyo. The life and death of all beings, as well as the formation and disappearance of all things, are the arising and extinction of Myoho Renge-kyo. In this regard, Nichiren explains that the two Buddhas, Shakyamuni and many treasures, represent the two phases of life and death. Now, did everybody understand that? Because what do we know from modern science, right? Everything in the universe experiences a beginning and an end. Correct? Everybody knows that, right? All right. Everything. Nichiren then lays out 3 points regarding the kind of faith people must develop in order to inherit the ultimate law of life. First, he says, we must exert ourselves in faith and practice and chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo with confidence that there is no distinction between the ultimate Buddha, the ultimate law, and the lives of ordinary people, since all of them are Myoho Renge-kyo. Now, that's common knowledge to us, but do understand what that's saying. What did that just say? There's no distinction. He says we must exert ourselves in faith and practice. So what does that mean? Chant, study, tell others, right? Yes. Okay. And chant to the Gohonzon, right? Okay. And then he says, and chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo with confidence that what he's saying now is the truth. With confidence that there is no distinction. Now, what does no distinction mean? It means they're exactly the same.
Right.
So it says that the ultimate Buddha, whatever that might be, okay, there's no distinction between that ultimate Buddha, the ultimate law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and the lives of ordinary people. Okay, he doesn't say my disciples even here, right? He says, and the lives of ordinary people. There is no distinction between the law, the ultimate Buddha, the original teacher, and the lives of all others, because they're all expressions of the same thing, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. That's the point. Okay, since all of them are Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, right? Okay, so to believe that there is no distinction among these three means believing that one's life is, at essence, the supremely noble life of the Buddha. So it means that you already believe that you are the Buddha. One can therefore reveal the life of Buddhahood in this present existence, because you can't unless you believe that. All right, that's part of the requirement of faith, right? Faith and practice, he says here, right? That's how we started out with. Faith in the teaching that Nichiren's leaving. All right. Put simply, this is referring to self-motivated faith, the faith of a bodhisattva of the earth, someone who has encountered the teaching of the Daishonin and something engages in their life in that process, and it begins something that they can't really stop, they can't really explain. It's something that's essential to them, that comes welling forth from their life. Nichiren Daishonin stresses that the profound insight that now is the last moment of one's life is an attitude of deep and self-reliant faith. Now, what does that really mean, though? Okay, I'll continue to read. He's going to explain it. Actually, again, that profound attitude, that the deep insight that now is last, it's ever present. The Gohonzon is ever present in your mind. Right? You don't take for granted, I can always start faith and practice later. I've got time. It's about now. Nichiren Daishonin stresses that the profound insight that now is the last moment of one's life is an attitude of deep and self-reliant faith. Second, to obtain the heritage of the ultimate law of life and death, one must develop continuing faith. In other words, one must vow never to forsake Myoho Renge-kyo in any lifetime, because that's again what qualifies you as the Bodhisattva of the earth. Bodhisattvas of the earth never forsake the Gohonzon in any lifetime. So anybody that you know that practiced, I don't care how long they practiced, if they went Taitan, they qualified themselves to have never really actually been the individuals that I'm talking about right now. You cannot go Taitan if you're actually a Bodhisattva of the earth. Do you understand? The people that never go Taitan qualify that they are bodhisattvas of the earth by never going Taitan. And that's the whole point of maintaining your faith to the last moment of your life. Okay? And I'm sorry if I raise my voice. It's not because I'm angry. I'm very emotional right now. Okay, so there is no heritage or of the law other than faith. Nichiren writes, refuting the formalistic, authoritarian, and esoteric transmission of teachings rampant in the Buddhist community of his day. Third, we can receive the heritage of the law and realize the great desire of Kosen Rufu through chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo with the unity of many in body, one in mind. Nichiren praises Sairinbo for following him amid oppression and, as a result, facing difficulties of his own. He then states that Sairinbo had become his disciple because of his profound karmic bond with his mentor. Also, he expresses his delight in Sairinbo's inquiry regarding the most important Buddhist teaching, writing, I have never heard of anyone who has asked such a question. Nichiren then indicates that he himself assumes the role of Bodhisattva superior practices who received the heritage of the law from Shakyamuni and many treasures. In these passages, Nichiren explains that the heritage of the ultimate law of life and death can be realized through the faith of the oneness of mentor and disciple. Nichiren concludes the letter by stating that the heritage of the ultimate law of life and death is nothing other than the heritage of faith. And he encourages Sairinbo to develop his faith, to further develop his faith. Does anybody have any questions? That was all clear. Okay, going on to the next one, on page 12 of this thing. Revealing the heritage of the ultimate law of life and death. I have just, and I'm going to start reading the Gosho as little bits about this as we go along. This is from the Gosho. I have just carefully read your letter to reply the ultimate law of life and death as transmitted from the Buddha to all living beings is Myoho Renge-kyo. The 5 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo were transferred from Shakyamuni and many treasures, the 2 Buddhas inside the treasure tower, to Bodhisattva superior practices, carrying on a heritage unbroken since the infinite past. From Writings of Nichiren Daishonin, volume, page 216. Continuing. At the beginning, Nichiren Daishonin writes, I have just carefully read your letter. Seirenbo seems to have postulated a question about the heritage of the ultimate law of life and death. In response, Nichiren clarifies that this ultimate law that should be transmitted is Myoho Renge-kyo. Myoho Renge-kyo is the Japanese pronunciation of the title of the Chinese Lotus Sutra, translated by Kumarajiva. Okay, you do understand that, right? Okay. But as discussed in this letter, Myoho Renge-kyo is not merely the sutra title. Nichiren understood Myoho Renge-kyo to be the essence of the Lotus Sutra. All the teachings contained in the Lotus Sutra stem from the fundamental law of Myoho Renge-kyo, and at the same point to it. Understood, everybody? Right? Nichiren says, Myoho Renge-kyo, Nichiren says, is the essential law and must be regarded as the ultimate law of life and death to be widely transmitted. And in this passage, he explains that Myoho Renge-kyo is the law that the two Buddhas, Shakyamuni and many treasures, transmit to Bodhisattva superior practices in the Lotus Sutra, after this entrustment, supernatural powers chapter, whatever. In the Lotus Sutra, the preaching from the emergence of the treasure tower, the 11th chapter, to entrustment, the 22nd chapter, takes place in midair. This portion, therefore, is called the ceremony in the air. Everybody's familiar, right? Okay. This is after the bodhisattvas of the earth have come out, right? This is a rite in which the bodhisattvas of the earth, and bodhisattva superior practices in particular, are enumerated with propagating the Lotus Sutra after Shakyamuni's death. Myoho Renge-kyo, Nichiren states, is the law that bodhisattva superior practices inherits. The teaching to be propagated after the Buddha's passing must be the fundamental law that enables all people to attain Buddhahood. Thus, Nichiren says, Nichiren says, is Myoho Renge-kyo, and it is the ultimate law of life and death. He also describes the 5 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo as carrying on a heritage unbroken since the infinite past. Unbroken since the infinite past. Why is that the case? Who's been around since the infinite past? Who always comes to carry and propagate the teaching after it's been revealed by the original teacher? The original disciples. Okay? That's why it's been carried on since the infinite past, because this is the process this has gone through each time the true Lotus Sutra, Myoho Renge-kyo, is revealed. Okay? The teaching to be propagated after the Buddha's passing must be the fundamental law that enables all people to attain Buddhahood, which is now Myoho Renge-kyo. This, Nichiren says, is Myoho Renge-kyo, and it is the ultimate law of life and death. He also describes the 5 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo as carrying on a heritage unbroken since the infinite past. The Lotus Sutra explains that the bodhisattvas of the earth, including bodhisattva superior practices, have been Shakyamuni Buddha's disciples since he attained Buddhahood in the remote past. That's the Lotus Sutra saying that literally on the surface. Since that time, the bodhisattvas of the earth have been taught by the Buddha and have continually been upholding the law of Myoho Renge-kyo. Bodhisattva superior practices and all the other bodhisattvas of the earth vowed to propagate the law with which Shakyamuni entrusted them so long ago. Nichiren states that the fundamental law to which Shakyamuni awakened in the remote past was Myoho Renge-kyo. Since Bodhisattva superior practices has been embracing and upholding this law for an immeasurably long time, his life has become one with the law. The entrustment of this law from Shakyamuni and many treasures to Bodhisattva superior practices is the surface meaning of the sutra text. The reason Nichiren writes here that Myoho Renge-kyo has been carrying on a heritage unbroken since the infinite past is to clarify that this eternal essential law has manifested within superior practices, within Nichiren's life, the life of the leader of the bodhisattvas of the earth. Myoho Renge-kyo as the life and death of all things, on page 15. Myo from the Gosho. Myo represents death and whole life. Living beings that pass through the two phases of life and death are the entities of the 10 worlds, or the entities of Myoho Renge-kyo. What did you say there? Myo represents death and whole life. Living beings that pass through the two phases of life and death are the entities of the 10 worlds. All entities, all living beings pass through that. So they're all entities of the 10 worlds. They are all entities of Myoho Renge-kyo. They are all Buddhas, right? Tentai says that one should understand that living beings and their environments and the causes and effects at work within them are the law of Renge, the lotus. Here, living beings and their environments means the phenomena of life and death. Thus, it is clear that where life and death exist, cause and effect of the law of the lotus is at work. Now, what did the Daishonin just say there? Here, living beings and their environments mean the phenomena of life and death. Thus, it is clear that the law, where life and death exist, cause and effect of the law of the lotus is at work. Wherever there's living beings, Myoho Renge-kyo is governing the reality that exists in them. The great teacher Dingyo states the two phases of life and death are the wonderful workings of one mind. The two ways of existence and non-existence are the true functions of an inherently enlightened mind. No phenomena, either heaven or earth, yin or yang, the sun or the moon, the 5 planets, or any of the worlds from hell to Buddhahood, are free from the two phases of life and death. Life and death are simply the two functions of Myoho Renge-kyo. In his great concentration and insight, Tentai says, arising is the arising of the essential nature of the law, and extinction is extinction of that nature. Shakyamuni and many treasures, the two Buddhas are also the two phases of life and death. Continuing with the lecture from the study department on page 16. In order to further clarify it as the heritage of the ultimate law of life and death, Nichiren Daishonin explains in this passage the relationship between Myoho Renge-kyo and the life and death of all things. He points out that at the foundation of the life and death of all living beings is Myoho Renge-kyo. What he explains here is essentially the true aspect of all phenomena, right? Okay, so as Nichiren states in the true aspect of all phenomena, all beings and environments in the 10 worlds are without exception manifestations of Myoho Renge-kyo. Furthermore, all phenomena go through the two phases of life and death. This is from the true aspect of all phenomena now. That is, all beings live and die, and environments also repeat the cycle of arising and disappearance, as we know from modern science now. This cycle of life and death, arising and disappearance, is inherent in the mystic law. This is what Nichiren means when he says Myo represents a death and Ho life. All things arise and disappear. In life they become manifest, and in death they become dormant. In this way, all things experience life and death, appearance and disappearance, repeatedly and for all eternity. All phenomena, including all life, exist in the mystic law's rhythm of life and death. We can think of an individual life, then, like a wave appearing on the surface of a great ocean and melding back into it. The ocean is the mystic law. Myo, or mystic, refers to death, and Ho, or law, to life. Law, or dharma, signifies in Buddhism a phenomenon, a manifestation of life. On the contrary, death is a dormant stage of being that cannot easily be comprehended by human intellect. This is why Nichiren compares the character of Myo, which means mystic or wondrous, to death. There are no exceptions to the cycle of life and death. The rhythm of the mystic law, all living beings of the 10 worlds are manifestations of that law. As Nichiren states, living beings that pass through the two phases of life and death are the entities of the 10 worlds. From the mystic law, which embodies both life and death, arise all causes and effects, all phenomena, all life, and all existences. Since the workings of all living beings in the 10 worlds from hell to Buddhahood derive from the law, we can deduce that the differences among the worlds are differences in manifestation. Do you follow? Because it's karmically, it's reflecting karma, right? Because all living beings of the 10 worlds are manifestations of the mystic law, Nichiren described them as the entities of Myoho Renge-kyo. Is everybody clear what he just said there, right? Right? Right, Amy? Okay. An entity of Myoho Renge-kyo is another expression for the simultaneity of cause and effect, a mystic characteristic of the law. Why? An entity of Myoho Renge-kyo is another expression for the simultaneity of cause and effect, a mystic characteristic of the law. Yeah, kind of, yeah. Buddhahood, you could say, but an entity of Myoho Renge-kyo. What would an entity of Myoho Renge-kyo be, even though it's everybody?
Is that Ichiran Sensen?
Right. Is another expression, again, the simultaneity of cause and effect is what's allowing you to express Buddhahood in your present form in living as a living being in the 9 worlds.
Yeah.
That's why he's saying an entity of Myoho Renge-kyo is another expression for the simultaneity of cause and effect. Because if you're an entity of the Myoho Renge-kyo, you're an entity of the mystic law, and what is occurring to you in your life as the Buddha of the original state is a simultaneity of cause and effect. That's how you're able to manifest that, right?
Right.
All right, so the mystic law, which everybody's with me, right? The mystic law, which governs the life and death of all beings, contains all cause and effects, all phenomena, right? Because there's nothing outside of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, right? In the mystic law, both cause and effect exist as one. That's that simultaneity, right? This wondrous simultaneity is expressed through the characteristics of a lotus renge. Usually plants flower and then bear fruit. The lotus, however, blooms and produces fruit at the same time, a symbol for the mystic law's simultaneity of cause and effect. The flower may be compared to a cause and the fruit to an effect. Here, the lotus of the analogy is referred to as a figurative lotus. Does everybody remember that from the entity of the mystic law? That gosho I read you that's so heavy that it's almost never discussed. All right, that's what we got: figurative lotus, and then we got the lotus of the lotus of the entity, right? Which is, to me, as I have expressed it to you in the past when I read you that gosho, it's understanding it theoretically and being it actually. Okay, they're two different things.
Right.
All right, because there's a threshold that has to be crossed before one becomes the other. One cannot occur until the other, without the other, though. You can't become the entity without understanding. Okay?
Right.
So, the flower may be compared to a cause and the fruit to an effect. Here, the lotus of the analogy is referred to as a figurative lotus. The subject of this comparison, the mystic law characterized by the simultaneity of cause and effect, is called the lotus of the entity, which also refers to the lives of all living beings of the 10 worlds, which are manifestations of the mystic law's simultaneity of cause and effect. When we're able to pull the Buddhahood of the 10th world into the 9 worlds because of that. When we're able to do that. Do you understand that? What I just said? There's a qualifier. You're not just automatically part of the club. Okay? Without making the effort to be so. Or doing the practices and faith that we started off with here in the very beginning. The causes and effects of all phenomena in the environment, the physical and mental causes and effects of a living being, and the causes and effects arising between a living being and the environment, all derived from the mystic law, the law of the lotus flower, embracing both cause and effect as one. This is why Nichiren quotes Tintai's words, living beings and their environments and the cause and effects at work within them are all the law of Renge. All phenomena, including life and its activities, can be understood in terms of subjective self and objective realm. Life and death, or cause and effect. All phenomena, however they may be viewed, derived from the mystic law. So let me get that on phenomena here. All phenomena, including life and all its activities, Now, what's all phenomena?
Everything.
Everything in the manifest realm. Okay? All phenomena, including life and all its activities, can be understood in terms of subjective self, the mind, and objective realm, the environment in which we live. Life and death, or cause and effect. All phenomena, however they may be viewed, derive from the mystic law. A life entity which repeats the phases of life and death, a temporary gathering of the 5 components, is an entity of the mystic law, or myoho. The mystic law is also the law of simultaneous cause and effect, renge. In other words, life entity is myoho rengekyo, the ultimate law of life and death. Did everybody understand that? Did that make sense? You got a question? I'll reread it again. All phenomena, including life and all its activities, can be understood in terms of subjective self. Now, what would subjective self mean? What's the difference between subjective and objective?
What to think about and what
Subjective is
real.
from your mind,
thinking,
right?
yeah?
Okay.
What you think about.
Right.
and
What you think.
The
Right. Okay.
the
Okay.
actual
Right.
things that objective is actual.
Right. Objective realm. The objective realm is you can't change no matter what your opinion of a tree is. It's a tree.
Right.
Okay. With your mind, you can do all kinds of things as you relate to how you think about you. You can't really speak for a tree, right? You can speak for you, right? So, okay. Again, all phenomena, including life and all of its activities, can be understood in terms of subjective self and objective realm. Life and death, or cause and effect. All phenomena, however they may be viewed. So there were 3 different ways you could view it, is what he was just saying. You could view it as subjective self and objective realm, or life and death, or cause and effect. It's all coming from Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, okay? A life entity which repeats the phase of life and death is an entity of the mystic law, or myoho. It's a manifestation of karmic influence, right? It's a temporary gathering of the 5 components. It is a manifestation of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, right? The mystic law is also the law of simultaneous cause and effect, Renge. In other words, a life entity is Myoho Renge-kyo, the ultimate law of life and death. You yourself are Myoho Renge-kyo, is what this is saying. Nichiren contains, not theoretically, actually, but you can only understand it theoretically. You have to create the wisdom to perceive the depth of faith necessary to actually understand this. Because you'll kid yourself into thinking that it's actualized because you understand it so well theoretically. Right. You accept it theoretically. You think that acceptance is the no, that's not actualization. Actualization is now living this way, not being aware of this. The awareness of this doesn't mean shit in the absence of action. Okay? So, he also writes, Shakyamuni and many treasures, the 2 Buddhas, are also 2 phases of life and death. Shakyamuni and many treasures are seated together in the treasure tower at the ceremony, Lotus Sutra ceremony of the year. Those 2 Buddhas also symbolize life and death aspects of Myoho Renge-kyo. All right? Shakyamuni is preaching in the here and now to liberate people from misery. Do you understand that? What does he mean by that? Shakyamuni is preaching in the Lotus Sutra. For who? His disciples that will appear in the former and the middle day of the law and greasing the skids for the original teacher who will make his advent in the 5th 500-year period, where the bodhisattvas of the earth remanifest to pacify the land. Right? Kosa, pizza something in the pacification land, whatever the Risho and Kokoran translates to. Again, page 19, this last one I'll get in because it's already almost time. Shakyamuni is preaching it in the here and now to liberate people from misery. Accordingly, he represents life. As many treasures is a Buddha of the past, he no longer preaches the law and therefore represents death. The life and death of everything constitutes the two phases of Myoho Renge-kyo. Therefore, Shakyamuni and many treasures represent these two phases, signifies that these two Buddhas at essence are Myoho Renge-kyo. Myoho Renge-kyo is the entity, and Shakyamuni and many treasures are its functions, as we are. All right? From another perspective, many treasures Buddha represents the eternal truth, and Shakyamuni Buddha represents the ultimate wisdom to understand the eternal truth. These two Buddhas seated together then represent the fusion of reality and wisdom. What's that, Rio? You just said it a minute ago. Huh? Kyochi Myogo. Kyochi Myogo. These two Buddhas seated together then represent the fusion of reality and wisdom. The totality of this fusion of objective reality and subjective wisdom is called Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Do you understand? We just now shifted from calling everything Myoho Renge-kyo, Myoho Renge-kyo, Myoho Renge-kyo. It just became Nam-myoho Renge-kyo because we're now talking about Nichiren and the latter day of the law. Okay? Mm-hmm. From another perspective, many treasures Buddha represents the eternal truth. He represents that truth. What is that eternal truth? Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay, and Shakyamuni represents the ultimate wisdom to understand that eternal truth. That's what we do, right? Okay, what is that understanding? Kyochi Myogo, actually. That is the fusion of that is that understanding. It's not Ichinen Sanzen. Ichinen Sanzen is, again, a theoretical construct for how you can be the Buddha. That's 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. That's about the simultaneity of cause and effect. We talk about Kyochi Myogo, we're talking about fusion of your mind with the Gohanzan. Okay? Now that's what everybody tries to achieve, as though it's some sort of a mystic thing that they're going to get, and then they got that one handled. No, that never happens. That kind of Kyochi Myogo, you realize, Kyochi Myogo is to realize you're the Buddha exactly as you are, and not be a theoretical circumstance. That's actual Ichinen Sanzen is what that actually is. Okay, Kyochi Myogo is actual Ichinen Sanzen. Right. From another perspective, many treasures Buddha represents the eternal truth, and Shakyamuni represents the ultimate wisdom to understand the eternal truth. These two Buddhas seated together then represent the fusion of reality and wisdom. The totality of this fusion of objective reality and subjective wisdom is called Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. When we awaken to the truth that our lives are the entities of Myoho Renge-kyo, when we achieve Kyochi Myogo and actual Ichinen Sanzen, we realize we are the Buddha exactly as we are. The great cosmic rhythm of life. And when we realize that life and death are two phases of Myoho Renge-kyo, we can transcend all sufferings in life as well as the anxiety of death, because we have the wisdom of the Buddha. We can establish a fundamental sense of security and courage, vitality and wisdom to live fully. Okay? Did I bore you too much?
No.
Okay, good. This is a little dry. So at any rate, we will start next week on 3 wonderful points. It's called the life is the entity of Myoho Renge-kyo, starting again on page 20 of this. We will continue on page 20 next week. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I'm kind of spaced out. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.